On page 480, we're going to look now at probability 8.7. Now, probability of an event is the chance that this event will occur. So you have done chance in primary school, and we have done probability before. So this is just a recap of what probability actually is. What is an event? An event is a collection of outcomes. And as we go on, this will become much clearer. So the probability of event is the number of outcomes where the event occurs divided by the total number of possible outcomes. So if I am throwing a six-sided dice, I will say that the number of outcomes where this event can occur. So let's say the probability of getting a 1 when I throw a six-sided dice. How many possible ways can I have a 1? There's only one possible number of outcomes to get that probability of 1. Divide by how many possible outcomes there are, which is 6. So the probability of getting a 1 is there's one chance out of 6. And that is all that this is indicating. Now, the probability are often written as a fraction, but can also be written as a decimal or a percentage. Now, I just showed you it was 1 and 6. Now, why can our probability always or never be more than 0 or less than 1? Now, remember, we have this probability of an event, which is the number of outcomes. If we go back to chucking a dice, and we say the probability of getting a 0 when I throw a dice, how many possible ways is there to get a 0? And that is 0. There's no way that I can get a 0. So this will be 0 out of 6. And you can't get anything less than that. That is why we have a minimum value of 0. Why can't we go more than 1? Well, if I ask you what's the probability to get any number between 1 and 6, how many possible ways are there? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 6 different outcomes. Out of how many possible outcomes? 6. So the chance of getting that is 1. And that is why the probability can never be more than 1 or less than 0. Now, in English descriptors, you need to understand this. If I have a 0, it means it's impossible. What's the probability of getting a 0 when I chuck a dice? It is impossible. What's the chance of getting a 1 to a 6? Well, that is certain. What's the chance of getting an even number? That is a half, and that means there's an even chance for us to get that. Now, just quickly showing you what we mean by you can also do this. A half, if I do this as a decimal, it is 0.5. And 0.5, to write that as a percentage, that is a 50% chance. So any one of these three, a fraction or a decimal or a percentage means exactly the same thing. Sample space. When we talk about sample space, it's the set of all possible outcomes of a trial or an event. For example, if the event is chucking a dice, the sample space for this roll of die is all the possible outcomes. So that can be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. The last thing that we need to understand is what the complement of an event is. And we'd write that complement as E dash. So if we look at this E dash, it means not E. So, and together this must equal 0. So for example, if I say the probability of getting a 1 when I throw a six-sided dice will be 1 in 6. What is the probability of not getting a 1? The probability of not getting a 1 means that there must be 5 out of 6, and together it must add up 1. So it's either 1 or it's not a 1. So 1 in 6 and 5 over 6 will always give us a 1. That is what the complement of an event is, not getting a 1. Let's have a look at some examples. Before I get to examples, I just really want to, some of you do not know a lot of cards and a lot of things about cards, so we just quickly want to give this as a little bit extra so that you understand when we ask you questions about cards what it actually means. First thing you need to know is that we have 4 suits. So there's 4 suits, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 suits, and they are called, will be clubs, spades, hearts, and diamonds. You can also see that there's 2 colors. There's all the black cards and all the red cards. The next one that we would like to know are the picture cards, also called face cards. These cards are the cards that have the Jack, Queen and King, and you can see that there's altogether 12 of them. So please remember, 4 suits, there's altogether 13 of each, which means there is 52 cards altogether. 12 of those are picture cards. Remember this so you can use it in the exam. Now let's look at this working with probability. Example 11. I want to make you attend of the following: that number C and number E of this work example is wrong in your textbook, so please make sure that you do get them right. So the letters of the word prince are written onto 6 equal sized cards, and 1 is chosen at random. State the sample space. So the sample space, which will be A, we will say the sample space is all the possible outcomes. So the possible outcomes, if I pick a card, is P, R, I, N, C, and E. That will be the sample space because that's all possible outcomes. B, find the probability. Find the probability. Just undo that, that's ugly. The probability of finding the letter N. Probability of finding N. So if I pick a card, how many possible outcomes, how many favorable outcomes are there? There's 1 N, and I'm going to pick that out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 cards. So the probability is 1 in 6. I always have to check, is this in simplest form? And my answer is yes. C. What is the sample space of the event V choosing a vowel? So the event is V. So what's the probability of finding a V? That is the event, therefore the event is finding a V. Now the reason that the question is wrong, or the answer is wrong in the book, is what is the possible outcomes if I pick? Now if I pick out of prince, it means there is the sample space is 6. I'm going to choose out of 6 numbers, and therefore it is still out of 6. Okay, what is how many vowels are there? There's 2 vowels, 2 out of 6. Now please see that I'm now doing question D actually, and then I'll go back to C, and 2 over 6 is the same as 1 over 3. Now going back to C, they say what's the sample space of the event V? So the sample space, what is all the possible outcomes? It is still P, R, I, N, C, and E. If they wanted to have the answer, so if the book wants the answer to be I and E, they should have asked you what are the favorable outcomes to choose when I choose a vowel. That will be I and E, not a sample space. The sample space is all possible things that I can have, and if I pick out of prince, that is the sample space. That will be the same for E now. What's the sample space if I want to find a complement? I still got to pick out of the total P, R, I, N, C, E. That's still the sample space. What's my favorable outcomes? If I choose something that's not a vowel, that will give us the P, R, N, and C. That is not a vowel. But this is not the sample space. This is called your favorable outcomes. Now, in F, they ask us what is the question, what is the probability of not finding a V, and that will be 2 out of 3, because finding V is 1 out of 3. The complement means it makes up the total, which means it must be 2 out of 3, because 1 out of 3 and 2 out of 3 will give us 3 out of 3, and that is why it's called the complement. Please have a look at exercise AG according to your timeline. If you have any questions, kindly ask your teacher. Thank you.